All right, welcome to the August North Dallas Developers Group. Today we have Blake, all the way from Green Bay, going to talk about how to build and maintain a smart home. Take it away, Blake.
Yeah, so I might have seen a few of you before. I've presented before on ASP.NET air handling about 2 years ago. I'm a software developer during my day job, building software, open source software and educational software. I find that there are a lot of places overlap between smart homes and software development, especially like in messaging systems. And so it's kind of a learning experience in some regards. And then, like, oh, I know that. So that's a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm in Green Bay, and there's not too many people doing smart homes up here. It's mostly just commercial. So it's been reading a lot online, and it's a joy to learn something new. And let me tell you, you learn a lot. So I want to give you some best practices and like what I've learned along the way and things to do. Start out and like what is a smart home. The very big definition is a device that can automate tasks, and to me, like, it's so much more than just like a single device. It's a concept, like a way of like safety. Like, is my family safe? Am I safe? Like, am I safe from like not only an intruder, but like is a tornado, an earthquake, or something happening that like can be forewarned and let me know, like via like blinking lights or like audible notifications, or like a fire is happening. Show me, the exit point, open the doors, turn off the furnace, things like that. But also like a way to like save money, tiered billing on power bills. Can I do things at night? Can I offset this? Can I think about my impact on the environment? And lastly, comfort, like taking all those things into thing, like, can I stay comfort and just live life how I want to live it? So that's, to me, like what a smart home is. I think that there is some really like good first steps like you should take before you consider doing a smart home. You might already started, and I think that it's worth like reevaluating this. I think that like you need to think about the definition of a smart home and come up with like a goal. Like, what is your end goal? Like, what do you want to remedy? And just focus on just that. Like, don't go crazy and and have smart devices for everything. Solve one problem first, make sure you're comfortable with that, and then it works to your expectations. And like I said, like you might have like existing ecosystems. So like, do you have Google devices? Do you have, Alexa devices? Which I should have muted mine. Or do you have Apple devices? Do you have existing devices that you can reuse? Like, don't throw things away. You can incorporate them into your workflows and your smart home to work for you. So like, consider this, like create like a checklist, write down all these things so you have it in your mind as you go, so you don't lose focus. And then once you have that, like, research, make sure a company is well established, make sure that you have a huge community presence around that product or service. Like, make sure that there's advocates that like love that and use it, or that have like either have official libraries or people have hacked an API together. To me, like, that says, hey, this is worth using, and that it's going to be supported. Ideally, find something that has an open standard. Like, that, to me, that is a future winner. Like, a future winner in my definition is something that's going to be around in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Because if you're installing a light switch or something, like, you need that thing to work for a very long time, and it needs to do its job. It can't just like fail. A company can't go over and now your light switch doesn't work. Like, that doesn't work for anyone. And then think about like, am I the product here? Like, is this switch free, or like, is it reporting on my data? Like anytime someone walks by it, am I being sold? Like how important is privacy to you? You might, if you have like Amazon Ring devices, you might already be thinking about this, with their different programs and sharing data, and employees having access to that data. Like, I think it comes down to like your core beliefs, like when doing a smart home, because there's every side of the full spectrum. And then lastly, like costs. I mean, you can, if you have an unlimited budget, you can have someone hire a company. There's massive companies that's all they do, and they have their own development teams like doing end-to-end integrations. Or you can piecemeal it together if you're a hacker and you like doing that, or you're a developer and you have some time. It's going to take some time, but like you can do any project with a few cents, or you can go thousands of dollars. So it's kind of a really wide range. It's like you're paying, is your time valuable, or is your learning and having fun doing it valuable? So kind of like think of these as the very first steps before you even purchase a device. And then when you think you've gotten the research, do more research. So in 2018, I started my research for the house that I bought. I knew that I needed to do reno, and I spent 4 months researching products. And I don't think that that's doable for a lot of people. I think that I think it's going to take a long time before smart homes evolve to the point to where like anyone can just go to the store and pick a device that works across the board. I think there's some open standards coming up that is making that more available, like Google and Apple and everyone's working together on that. So keep that in mind. So when I worked for 4 months, I followed CES in spring, and now with that going all digital, like you'll be able to watch it. I followed a lot of blogs and did a lot of searches and keyword alerts in Google, because I wanted to know like what were the emerging technologies. Like I don't want, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to spend my time and money, I want something that's going to be supported, that's going to work, and like long term. And so you can kind of see like I was pretty naive in my initial approach, and I just wanted like release dates, and I did conditional formatting and pricing, and just kind of get a general idea like what works with what. There really isn't too many services out there for doing this, and it's kind of manual. And I think I'll spend some time and eventually publish this list, or maybe an up to date or a resource that people can use, because it needs to be more available. And a part of that is like writing reviews. Like we need more people in the smart home community writing reviews. And I have a ton of reviews that I need to write about, because not every switch is like perfect. I have issues with some of my Ecobee switches after using them, where they're really sensitive. If like the power goes out, the switch might not come back. In some cases, I have to reset a breaker, or they've removed functionality after the fact via firmware update. And those things you don't get from initial reviews. It's kind of, you need the community to guide you, which can be tough. It takes a little bit of legwork. Again, like breaking down costs, vendor lock-in, does something require batteries? Like what is the hub support? And I think like the biggest thing to me is like a progressive enhancement. So long time ago, like a developer reference, when JavaScript was really like first emerging, there were some really good books about talking about, hey, like your site should still work completely, without JavaScript. But if you have JavaScript, you can do some nice things like sorting in tables and things like that. But don't blow up the website if it, doesn't support JavaScript. And I think the same thing goes with when you're picking out products. Like if you're picking out a light switch, pick out a light switch that like works. If it has like a temperature sensor and like a motion sensor and a night light, that's great, but don't take away from the core functionality. Like you want these things to work how people have always expected. Like if your grandma comes and visits, like you shouldn't have to explain and make them feel uncomfortable. You have to think about the end consumer too, because you never know. Next, like when you're doing your research and planning, I'm kind of like looking in the upper right-hand side of my screen, take even a very basic floor layout of your place and kind of think about where you want to put your devices. Like for example, do you want a motion sensor on this wall and the other wall so you can get overlap if you're going to do a home, like your own security system based off motion sensors, or you want to make sure that lights always like turn on in sequence. It takes thought, and you're not going to just do it while you have a hired contractor or yourself there. Like you need to think ahead, plan ahead. I don't think very many people do it, and they really should, because it takes a lot of effort. Even if you're not like doing new construction or renovating, like just device placement, you even think of like your access points and things like that, like connectivity. Really think about that ahead of time. And then, like if you get any work done, like on the image on the right, that was my multimedia room that I opened up, and I found an RG and a Cat6 cable like running down it. I still like ran everything I could in tubing, because I'm thinking ahead. Like I can wire this for 10 gigabit now, but I might run fiber there tomorrow, and I don't know like what's changing. So I can re-pull wire in a pipe, but I can't through a wall. And also like take measurements, because you don't know like if you're ever going to need to mount a TV on that wall, like exactly where it's at, or things like when things are open. It's just planning ahead, take a picture, save it, delete it after everything's done. It's really going to save you time and money. And, one small tip if you're doing construction, protect yourself from sheetrockers, because you don't want your cabling and things messed up. And then, when you're planning out your room, if you're doing like switches and construction, think about like 3-ways. A lot of smart switches don't work with 3-ways, and that's part of the thing you'll find from research. Like not many people are talking about this. And finally, you can see like my wife actually sent me that picture in the lower right of where she wanted something relocated. Like talk with your spouse or whoever's living in the area with you to figure out the best plan for everyone, because it does come down to a lot of research. So, like if you're thinking about new devices, just buying new devices for your old home or remodeling or construction, you kind of have two options. Like, do you hire it out or do you do it yourself? There's a lot of costs with either, and there's definitely way more with hiring it out. But are you comfortable doing that? And do you have the funds? Make sure that you come up with like existing solutions if they're proposed to you that like you can either verify that you like, or that they're future proof, because they're software built by these companies is it a subscription model, or is it just the software that I buy and install the day I have for 30 years? You gotta think about that. If you're going to hire someone, and this kind of bit me a little bit, ask for references. Like I think if you're hiring anyone to work on your house, ask for like the last 3 references from the last 6 months, and then call those people and talk to them, no matter what the project is. And, make sure you're getting a bid for this, so you know what the costs are up front. And more specifically, when you're doing a smart home, ask them how many smart homes they've done. Like, if it's an electrician, ask them if they've installed smart switches before, because the manual for a smart switch, it takes a little bit of wiring. It's slightly different. Or if it's plumbing, ask them if they've installed a smart shower. I asked my plumber if they've installed a smart shower before, and they said yeah. And it comes to find out, when they did it, they could hook up all the valves, but I'm actually the one who had to activate the shower and get it set up and configured. So to me, like, they hadn't done a smart home before, even though they told me they had. It's just that, in depth doing your research, finding people that you're comfortable with, and knowing all the answers ahead of time so you can execute, because it all comes down to execution. Yeah, and it's like you don't have a money tree. I mean, maybe some people do, but I definitely don't. You have to figure out what your limit is on what you want to spend. Like, is your spouse going to kill you? Is she on board, or he or she? And can you wait for a sale? Like there's a lot of sales that go on from time to time. They're not always, and it really depends on like the product category. But typically I wait for a sale. I use camel, and I figure out like, hey, in February this normally goes down, or Black Friday was this price last year, and then I make sure that I get it for that price or better. I can wait for some things. I'm waiting to perfect my automations that I have. Like I'm not going crazy. And lastly, like if there is a product, like again, if you can build it yourself, how much is your time worth, and can you execute? Lastly, like on the research, think about like accessibility. Like a lot of people go with smart bulbs, and there's nothing wrong with smart bulbs. I have them; they work great. But know like your application. Like when I was talking before, like about make sure it works. Don't 3D print or buy a light switch cover so no one ever turns on the light switch because your light bulb will stop working. That I don't like. I'm sure there's an application for it, and that's the only thing you can do. Sure, but there has to be a better way. Think about your end users. For me, like that was a core thing. Like I wanted it to work exactly how someone would come in off the street and they could, interact with your house and stay and be comfortable. And finally, like no matter how much, research and planning and execution you do, like things are going to break. They are going to fail. And like if your automations and your products are a progressive enhancement, like things will just keep on working. And you might your automation that was making your life more enjoyable, you'll definitely realize like, oh crap, like I got to do this right now because or like when it starts working again, if there's an update or a service outage or something, like you picked a remote device, like it's all about trade-offs. Like you're definitely going to know things aren't working, but when they work, it's awesome. So I kind of wanted to highlight like how much things can break, and not all these were bad, but it's worth pointing out because these all go into research. So I'll cover in like the hub that I picked. I picked Home Assistant Run all my software. I feel like it's like really good, and it's actively maintained and one of the most popular GitHub projects. And they do breaking changes, but they're good breaking changes. But if you keep up to date, it's not so bad. It's 10 minutes of work here, 10 minutes of work there, but it adds up. And in 2019, the hardware that I had Home Assistant on failed multiple times due to writes on a Raspberry Pi. And so that to me was kind of a breaking change. Like I had downtime, and the software had breaking changes when you upgraded. So something to consider. My Q, I went with their garage doors because I wanted battery backup, and they worked with a Home Assistant, my hub, and it comes to find out like they seem to be a cat mouse game where they keep on doing validation checks on the user agent. And so when they give you an iPhone or an Android app update and they're like, oh, improving the service, chances are they're probably trying to break you. So it seems like a cat mouse game. So, think about that when you're picking out vendors, like, are they friendly to the ecosystem you operate in? Also, like, if Lowe's is a massive company and they shut down their smart home platform. And, that's pretty massive. Like, if you're going to a store and you shop at Lowe's and you're like, oh, yeah, I can do a smart home. Like, they have everything. They had all these different sensor types. They had all the server-side software. And then just one day they just shut down. That does happen. Like, you have to do your research. Like, how dedicated are these people, are these companies? If you have to think about, like, you have to make sure, like, hey, I'm not the product. This keeps on working locally if that's important to you. But how is their revenue model? Like, are they going to shut it down if they're not making, a few percent on the service, or, like, it's a business. Same token, Works with Nest shut down. They had thousands of people of devices that worked with Nest that just stopped working. And guess what? You couldn't get an API key after a certain day. So I still haven't upgraded my Google account for that reason, because my devices would stop working with my automations. And there's a fork to get it, but it's not actively maintained. It's not as good as the original. So it's something to think about. And I definitely think that if you're going to use a service, the one thing that has taught me is get an API key as early as you can if you know you're going to use their product, just in case they kill API access for new keys. And then again, like Comcast purchased Stringify, which is kind of like IFTT, and they shut it down after 18 months. So if you're using that, you had a lot of buy-in. It's cloud-based, and you're out of luck. You're searching for a solution. Same thing with Best Buy's smart home products. Their products kept on working, but you lost all software access. So that's kind of troubling in 2019. If you think about it. And then you think about what happened in 2020. Well, Home Assistant broke some software and integrations, like no web scraping, and they document all this ahead of time. They let you know about it. So, it did take a little bit to upgrade it or use a third-party add-in. The community is really good about that. I still think that's the best solution. But again, my queue broke a couple times, so there's definitely an ongoing trend there. And ecobee HomeKit support, they dropped support for some of their motion sensors and temperature sensors on about a third of my 15 to 20 devices. That just got a software update and was like, no, we're not doing this feature anymore. And the same thing with my August Connect. I have 5 August Connect. They look like this. These doors, they work awesome. But the Connect Hub just stopped working. 3 of the hubs stopped working, even one that I just recently installed. And so it's like, well, was that an intentional firmware update, or like what's going on? Luckily, like, I did research to pick a device that had Z-Wave, and I could fall back to a local open standard to talk to my devices. So I didn't have to rely on a Wi-Fi connection to their cloud. And then next, the Wink Hub, they said, oh, in a month or 2, we're going to require a paid subscription to use our hub. Otherwise, you can't use it. So now you've built up an ecosystem of all your devices and your automations, and now you got to pay to use them. That's kind of, stark. And Logitech, shutting down some of their products again. Luckily, they said they were going to do refunds for people, but they didn't do that the previous time they broke people. And then you have to worry about acquisitions. Apple bought Dark Sky and then closed down API access, and is going to merge it into their own services. So there's definitely a pattern of smart home technologies and devices that the companies really don't care about you. They want your money, and they don't really care about like local access. They just want payday, and then when it comes time for long-term maintenance, they might not be there. So you seriously got to consider that when doing a smart home, which is a lot. Like you might be overwhelmed. Like it can be overwhelming. Which brings me to my point: companies will break you intentionally or unintentionally, and they will sell your data if they're given the chance. I mean, not all companies. Apple's pretty good about that, but you honestly don't know what happens all the time, or they could be acquired, and close that way. Finally, like research, if your wife likes something or your spouse, in my case, keep them happy when you're doing this. Like figure out the things that annoy them the most, and fix those. For me, like my wife would always ask me every night, is the front door locked? Is the back door locked? Are the windows closed? Are the lights off? And it's like, well, I could install something without even changing the door or anything, and I could knock off some of those off my list really easily without even if I owned an apartment. And that you didn't get asked those questions anymore, and you just kind of knew, like the automations and the software could tell you. That doesn't mean like I still didn't, like as I'm walking by, going to bed, like I wouldn't just glance over just to double check, because you never know. But it's just like peace of mind, and finding those things can can really improve the quality of life and you know, get you some points later for when it fails. So lastly, like in your research, you know, pick a hub. So there's a lot of different cloud software out there. You could think like IFTT could potentially be a hub, just redirecting messages between devices. You know, there's Wink that I noticed before or mentioned before that, you know, started charging a subscription. You know, they have Google, you can use HomeKit, Alexa has routines, you know, all those would be considered a hub. I like Home Assistant because, you know, it's open source, it's local, and they care about your privacy. You know, a hub will like connect all your devices and you know, the good ones will like normalize events and you're thinking in terms of abstractions. But like sadly, like none of them are really highly available if you're thinking from a programming standpoint. You know, you either have a dependency on your internet connection, which is a limiting factor, or your power in your house, or, you know, it's not running on multiple machines. So, you know, pick something that is open, secure, maintained, and has really easy backups for that reason. So you can get back to, you know, 100% quickly, or, you know, you don't have to worry about doing, you know, doing maintenance yourself. Like that sucks. No one wants to do that. Finally, like, you know, if you have a maintained solution, like the cloud vendors will update, but if you have something local, you know, update your software often, but, you know, to limit breaking changes that are really big. But, you know, like if things are working great, like you might not need to update. You know, don't update like every release. You need to wait for a point release from a major, you know, and have backups just in case. So like, and also like you have to think like when you're picking a hub, you know, like most of them will have automation support. Home Assistant has great automation support, you know, built in right out of the box, and you can define them in YAML or the user interface. But, you know, you have language choice. Like you can use add-ons that are supported by the community, like Node-RED, or, you know, you can write automations in Python, JavaScript, and other type languages. Most of them use WebSockets or polling for the if you're going with a language support that's not like built in to the physical product like Home Assistant. But, you know, all these have trade-offs, and I think that's the biggest thing about smart home. Like it is a distributed system of devices that are all hopefully talking to each other over different protocols and working together. So, you know, there is maintenance. Like, how do you limit your scope? Because if you add one more piece, that's one more piece that can fail. So try to do as much as you can in box. And I think like this term, you might have heard it before, you know, KISS, keep it simple. Don't go crazy. You know, a prime example of this would be, you know, like doing something with facial recognition and then requiring like a prompt, or like opening a door, or, you know, like a chain of events that's like insane to hit. Like any of those can fail due to, you know, a message, a service call out of order, etc. You know, you got to think in terms of messaging system, because everything is being passed through, you know, a state store, and a message, an event occurs, and you're just reacting to that. And, you know, like I said, upgrading can break you, you know, be it cloud services getting incremental updates, SDKs getting updates, or the core software. But, you know, look at the history. Like our company is normally really good about documenting breaking changes and, you know, making it right and making sure, you know, you're good to go. I have a friend who has a home automation system that's using SmartThings, and they split that. They came out with a totally new app, and the systems were completely split, but he couldn't migrate because of his home alarm, and he had to make a bridge with virtual switches, and there was really no support, but it happened, you know, kind of minor over time. And so you might not always have the history, but generally you'll have the history of how companies and software behaves. So like going on, to automation must-haves. Fix things that the spouse notices or like complains about. For me, it was like the first things I did were I made sure the bedroom fans were turning on, at 9 o'clock every night. Or like when you plug in your phone next to the bed to charge, like bedroom fan comes on. And curtains closing, when it either got really hot out or, like when you slept in or, towards the end of the night, just things that you find yourself doing repetitive, maybe keep a note before you even start as part of your research. Like, hey, these are things I do every day. And can I, how much time will I save by not having to do that anymore? So that's kind of the things that annoy you, and also like automate things that you can learn from. I love learning, so I spent time working with facial recognition and saying hello to either a known face or an unknown face that was at my door. But you also have to know context, like saying someone's suggested age and sex to someone at the door might not be appropriate. So definitely have flags for that. It's always good to have that contextual data, even though it could be wrong. And also, like I reverse engineered my Kohler shower and automated that. Like that was just really fun project. I learned Python over the weekend and made a Python library that I put on the Python package manager and a community add-on for Home Assistant that anyone can use with their Kohler devices, and it was a good learning experience. I learned a lot. Next is automation fails. So there'll be breaking changes even inside your automations. Like a state trigger might behave differently after an incremental update. You might need to go just update that. It has happened in Node Red library. They've been really good about that. Like they'll keep the behavior behind, but they'll show like a little flag on a node, which I'll show in a little bit. But they'll be like, hey, you can upgrade to a new version with this behavior, and it's like awesome. And then you got to think like it's a distributed system, so and distributed systems fail, and they fail pretty epically. So keep that in mind is why your automation could be failing. Next, going on that, there's no message guarantees. Like something, might go offline or lose connectivity. You might miss a few events. So, eventual consistency is a real thing in automations and a smart home. And you can have service failures in your routines that could prevent a state change or like a later down automation from failing. And I want to blog about a couple of these. I actually registered the domain name smarthome.fail, which points to my normal blog, and I'm going to point that to a specific category because I want to start hearing like what the fails of the community are, and also my own personal fails, because I've had some pretty epic ones where I'm like looking at the code and the automation, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? And then you make sure never to do that again. So let me go in. I can ask questions before I go and show my home automation system and some of the automations and things you can do. But now would be a good time for questions.
I'll go. Hey, my name is Arik. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Hey, thank you, man. This was really awesome what you presented. So I've dabbled in this a little bit. One of the, and I've got a whole, I'll try to be very succinct, but so I started off with, okay, let me start, right? Home automation. And every product I saw, like you showed Ecobee, you showed Tradfield, IKEA, or Philip Hue, everything you log into a third-party site and you're dependent on them. And I used to work for a marketing technology company, and they mine your data like nobody's business, right? So that I'm very hesitant to put any of my information out there. So so my approach was to look at OpenHab, and I'll give you a preface and then maybe seek your comments on this. So I chose OpenHab over Home Assistant because I couldn't get it to work on my Raspberry Pi 2, right? I need a 3 Plus or something like that. I didn't have that. but the other point there was, of course, it had MQTT, which meant that great, I could do the if then and that at home. But the other piece there was OpenHAB has the ability for external access, right? So I'm sitting in another country, I'm on the internet, but they give you that, provide that capability to access your home system through a login, which does HTTPS connectivity,
Yep.
etc. Now, on the devices themselves, I'm still going on my background here. Please give me a moment. I chose to move away from a branded product because of the security concerns or my data being out there. So I took the path of, the Sonoff. You can update your own firmware on it, in which case it doesn't ever talk to whoever manages Sonoff data. You just put it on your OpenHAB and or in this case, Home Assistant. I
Yeah.
think Sonoff Mini does the switch control too. So that's one piece I looked at. The other piece was on the garage door, for instance. If you put MyQ, you're dependent on whoever supplies the MyQ. I don't have the name in front of me right now, but you're dependent on them for your integration and access. So
Yep.
I came up with my own, ESP32 solution with your relays to be able to control that. Have you? And that's the path I've been kind of proof of concepting all of this, right, including my sprinkler system.
Yep.
Have you given any thought on those lines? Because or have you?
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't look too much into OpenHAB. I kind of knew like from being open source and I can see like this insanely popular project and looking at the code and like, hey, like, they have amazing documentation. This can run like on any platform. I mean, they're locking it down a little bit more. How you install and run Home Assistant. But so I went that approach, and I actually pay a $5 fee for their subscription because I don't have to do any port forwarding anymore or open a domain name to access my instance, because they proxy everything securely through their cloud, and their apps automatically fall back to like running all locally when it detects it's on your Wi-Fi network. So like nothing's leaving, and you can control exactly what goes there, and so it makes it really nice. And then they also as a part of their cloud service, like it just supports their developers. Like they're really open, and they've actually hired more developers to work on the project. And they also integrate like with one click with Alexa and Google, and forward all those events. So like that kind of made me feel really comfortable doing that and supporting that. At the same point, like, yes, I have totally gotten rid of like devices. I have one Amcrest camera, and I'll say flat out, that thing phones home to China so hard that literally when I made a firewall rule in my Unify firewall, because I have Ubiquity network gear, the firewall logs were insane. Like it was like once every second to a couple of times every second, like trying to make DNS requests and phone home for what. So yeah, I locked down all my devices in a NOT and IoT, and I have a bridge between those. And I try to think about how I can limit scope as much as I can. Nothing's ever perfect, but I think it's about trade-offs. But definitely, if you do not trust a company, don't support them. And the biggest way you can do that is with your wallet. And also, let people know exactly why, but show proof. As far as your garage doors, yeah. With MyQ, like I said, I wanted the backup. I do have one big overhead garage door that's a 14-footer, and I'm currently looking into that approach. There's actually a really good project. I think if you Google open sprinkler and open garage door, there's an open source solution that's using off the shelf hardware that you're using, and they have like plans and diagrams and everything you need to do that. And definitely, like sky's the limit. And I think that those solutions can be rock solid and work great. It's all about I think caring more about privacy and making sure it works really good. And if you need to open up a firewall for an update for your devices to update, like once a month, once every 2 months, sure, go ahead. There's no harm in that. But I don't let things make requests into my devices. Like they have to establish a connection first. Does that answer everything? You might be on mute.
I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was talking to myself. Huh? Happens a lot. I was heading down the path of buying the components, like buying the resistor, buying the diodes,
Yeah.
buying the the actual relays and putting them together with the soldering iron, right? And that's more fun just because I like to do that. Yeah, that's how I've ventured down the path, at least on my garage door. I've done a proof of concept with exactly on those lines. It's an ESP32 with a 232 is kind of it's too much for it, but it's cheap, so about that.
Yeah. I like those kind of projects. To me, like, time is money. I don't have time all the time, to go and do that. I would love to, but like I just bought a weather station, a Tempest weather station, and the thing's awesome. But the thing I love most about it is that I can access and share my data online if I choose, but I can also, talk to the hub and get push data via UDP packets. So like I don't, like devices that talk like to like MQTT, like the Bond Home, like they have cloud support, but they also have a fully local API, and they even have an MQTT broker, I believe, and you can just push events straight to it, and then you have you can work with anything, and I think that's something I definitely look for in devices, but I can't say that like a general person coming in with no developer experience is going to do that. That's why I think like smart homes is pretty still a ways away.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. So if we have no more questions, I'll dive into I'll kind of show my Home Assistant and kind of things you can do, and kind of show like defining automation. So here, I kind of have just the standard layout. I've kind of like grouped things, and I have a lot of add-ins running. I'm running everything on a pretty beefy latest gen NUC 10 with loads of resources. I got really tired of running Raspberry Pi, and then I went to Atomic Pi. I kind of talk about my experiences on my blog about the various hardware. And you can start out really small. Like I said, I started out on a Pi 3B, and kind of grow into it as your devices grow. I have a ton going on, and like I said, it's kind of there's always going to be something broken via services. Essentially, like I said, talked to like my August lock connect. This says the door's open, but it's not. But I know like via Z-Wave that it's locked, but they don't expose the locked state via Z-Wave. I mean, there is some access control. Sometimes it's there, but it's not always. So, I'm always looking for solutions for that. So kind of like a view, like I'm just capturing, I feel like if you can capture all the data, if you want to write an automation later to do it, like you totally have that power. So that's something I really like. And, like kind of outside view, I'm tracking out, outside illuminance to trigger if a switch should come on inside the house based on like, how dark is it outside in real time. And I'm getting that from my weather station locally, which is awesome. Which brings me to that next point. Like, you're going to learn a whole lot about like, data science when you're doing this. Like, you might not be looking for it, but you'll learn. Like you'll see something like, hey, like my lights just triggered to come on like via this spike right here, because this is raw data coming in. But like it really wasn't, that bright. That could have just been like a cloud coming over for a split second. And you don't really want that triggering your thing. So like, learning that the Home Assistant or your software has like all these different like algorithms that you can apply to your data to do transformation. Like this one has like a filter to smooth over the last 30 minutes. So I get much more uniform and consistency in my data. It's something to consider. And like I said, I have I guess I didn't mention this, but when you're researching devices, like think about like battery. So like I have a pond in my backyard, and I actually have a pond sensor, but the battery like died last week, and I haven't had a chance to replace it. And that's something to consider. Like there's always something to do. And the same thing, like I'm doing some image recognition, like there's some errors with Augur, and it thinks like that's a mouse. A shoulder is kind of funny, but Cats, and this is running in real time using the Coral API, which is pretty awesome. And then like looking through your data, like if you pump it into various systems, these are add-ons I can do one-click install, and it runs a Docker container and sets everything up with authentication and everything. Like I didn't have to do anything. Like it just happened, which is amazing. And you can like figure out, like looking at your data, like this is the outside brightness, this is inside via light sensors that I have in every room. You could figure out like, hey, you could do a correlation of the brightness and the temperature of the room, and like maybe close a blind, or turn on the AC at a certain time. Capture the data, and you can do some crazy things with. And it's just really interesting to see like what is going on. Like I'm a data guy. I like having as much data as I possibly can. And this really doesn't eat up too much system resources, disk space doing it either. Another really cool thing you can do, like I said, they have full support for Visual Studio Code. You can edit things. They're moving more in Home Assistant to configuring everything via the UI, which is really nice. But you still have code editor support built in. You can access via your web browser with a full CLI to do whatever you want. So in this example, I have an add-on that I installed. It's a community add-on, and it performs automated backups. And so I have an automation defined in YAML, and I can show you this in the UI. But it runs on a schedule and backs up, my Home Assistant install every day, and then notifies me of failures. At first, like they've really greatly improved the automation support and what it can do. But it wasn't until like recently. So like that's one of the reasons why I went with Node-RED, because I can do crazy things, which I'll show you. But the same automation here, that's it. I need to scroll on a little bit more. They have a full-blown editor. So this is the same automation that you can enable, disable, and trade. Some things don't come through exactly. Like you might not be able to see event data, or I guess this is the one saying snapshot failed. So this is it would be this one. So you're seeing missing my time conditions here, but they're there. But like again, like they're constantly improving, and this will be there. So you can create scenes too that are like really powerful. So like you can say like change your whole room to like be the exact state you want, and then you can say like create scene based on your current state, and then you can go change whatever you want, and you click you call the service to set the scene back, and then it will literally just revert everything back, and it's amazing. And you can also use that in your automations to say like, hey, like I need to flash the lights and play the audio at this level, create a temporary scene of the current conditions, and then jack with the settings, like pump up your audio and turn on your lights to a different color, etc. And then restore that state, that scene afterwards. So like they've put a lot of thought in it, and you can do all this stuff through the editor. Like it's getting good to the point where you don't need to be in VS Code. I just choose to be there because that's where I feel more comfortable, and I think that's what it's all about. I said like I do Node-RED, and so you can kind of think of I explain this as basically it's Visio for automations. I love that I can drag and drop and figure out like the flow of a certain series of nodes, and see visually like what is going on. It's not necessarily the easiest to grasp, but there's a lot of great YouTube videos like covering the different node types and how to work with it. But it is extremely powerful. So for example, this one has a timer, and you can flow through like all these conditions on what days you want it to run or months, and use like sun position or like different node types. And then I have flags to say like, are all my automations turned off, or is just this automation turned off? Because something might be broke, or you might not want to turn it on. Maybe you're doing construction in the room, working on the cleaning the fan, you don't want it to turn on. So like it's something to consider. And then like I only turn it on when I'm home because I want to save energy. I want to offset as much as I can to a 3-tiered billing, so I save money. I cut my bill. I had one crazy bill that was like $400, and I cut it to like 180 the next month just by tweaking my automations and making sure like everything was like, good. I mean, obviously there was other factors like, heating and air that made a big deal with that, but, measuring power usage and making sure like you're automating those in a timely manner. Like maybe you turn on or off, the lights for a shorter duration of time, like outside, which is kind of like what I have here. It's just kind of cool. Like you can define reusable chunks of code. You can think of these as like methods or like modules, namespaces. And so like turn on off with notifications. So basically it will turn on the entity, the abstraction, like, hey, turn on this light or this group of lights, and then tell me that I turned it on or if it was already at that state. So it's more kind of accessibility, but you can reuse these. The sky's the limit on what you can do. You can talk to different voice providers, etc. Do all kinds of things in Node-RED. I would kind of like to think, I think starting out, I think it'd be better to do all your automations directly in Home Assistant and kind of go that route because it's one less moving part. But I think that there's some things that just, I don't know if you could accomplish, but you can write your automations in many different languages. I have a friend that wrote a JavaScript automation framework that he uses to automate his house, and he hooks up the WebSockets and runs it all in a Docker container. Like the sky's the limit on what you can do. Yeah. So, check out my blog. I try to post a lot of things on home automation and I'll do occasional development, but I'm just trying to like make it so it's more accessible and people can learn like while reading and make good choices. So I think with that, I am done. I'm ready for questions.
Question. Do you have all of the stuff that you've actually chosen and are working with and think work? Do you put that anywhere? Is it just buried in your blog somewhere, or how do you let people know what you found that works?
Yeah, so I have a series of blog posts that I've written on home automation, and I got about 15 to 20 more that I want to write, and I have a whole slew of reviews that I want to write on the very products, like the good and the bad. I'm pretty straightforward. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So I want to do that. I followed CNN Smart Home when I was first doing my research, just for the sole fact that they're getting paid to push these products, but at least like I can see what products are out there, and then I can read, reviews or see what the specs are and figure out like, how many people are using this. Are there open source projects around this that people can see? And if you go, I have all my configuration on my GitHub, and so here, GitHub. My last name is a little bit hard to spell, but if you look at my Twitter or you follow Blake N, you can get here. And I have it here, but there is literally a lot of people sharing their configs. And if you search for something like configuration.yaml or some keyword term in here, you're going to find a ton of people that are sharing their configs. And some of them have went a great deal on providing their README. With what devices they're using. I think long term though that this isn't really going to be here. I'm still going to share my config, and you have to be really careful not to expose secrets. But the way that the Home Assistant is moving is they want to do more. You're setting up your device integrations like in the UI, and that's managed for you, and you're not doing it via YAML editor. so then, you know, they can automatically migrate things and change formats and schemas and just move forward and not break you. Because they find that people don't share their configuration and what works configuration wise, they share their automations, and they're going to make that easier to share. But I haven't found like a silver bullet for, you know, use this product for this. But, you know, like I said, I have like 20 blog posts like on deck. And if there's something that you have a question about, feel free to reach out. They also have a Discord. There's a couple of smart home Discord servers, like Home Assistant one is massive, and they have many channels that you can just go ask, be like, hey, you know, there's a DIY, and you can be like, hey, I'm trying to do this with this own custom, you know, chip. You know, has anyone done this? And chances are someone has. But it's just a lot of Googling.
Well, and yeah, that's been. I mean, I've been doing home automation since X10, and so I feel like we're in this great. I mean, what we've got is wonderful, but there's just so much. You know, finding the thing that's going to work for you, is tough. I mean, I'm gone through my. I've got the hub of my dreams. I just haven't had the time to go set it up. You know, it's just you end up keep going through this step after that step, and you know, just finding a good source of information. I appreciate everything you've shared here tonight, and it finding the information, it's all out there, but there's a lot of bad information, and picking the best thing is tough.
Yeah, and another thing is like requirements, and like what works. So like if you have ideas and like what you'd want to see, or it's hard to see, let me know. And I have a lot of things that I've bookmarked or like, you know, written down. And I just need to share it, but it's just getting time to blog it. It is hard. I try to do like 1 or 2 blog posts a month, but again, like I'm not the only source people should be looking at, you know, as well. But
what, you have a life or something? What the heck?
Yeah.
What was the weather station that you mentioned? I've got a Vantage on my roof, but it's been there for 6 years, so eventually it's going to fade out, and I'd really like something that was a little less proprietary. What did you say? Tempest?
Yeah, I got the Tempest, the weather station. They seem to have a really good track record, and a lot of people using them with the home automation, and all the sensor data is like real time, and like this is pretty awesome. I really like it. I didn't have one before. I always wanted one, but the biggest thing I wanted it for was the light sensor for my automations, because I have my lights come on when it's a certain darkness, like outside. Like I correlate the inside light sensor with the outside and figure out if I should turn it on. But this is the kind of information that it provides. So like I can see real time like lightning count, and I've seen it like a lightning strike like in front of my eyes, and the count goes up, and the rain rate. And it's just awesome.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, you talked about making your wife happy. When there's a big storm coming through, my wife gets up in the middle of the night and stares at her screen watching what's happening on our weather station, which, you know, and it's upgrading every 6 seconds, so she's like glued. Yeah. I had one that updated every 30 seconds for a while, and this is no good. So
yeah. So I like this too, because like I have, you know, pond and landscaping, and I need to spray chemicals, unfortunately. And so like I need to know like wind speeds like here right now.
Yep.
So it's really helped me. So, but like I said, like you can see like right here, like my Ecobee switches, like they broke the temperature sensor in some of my switches. They're all the same switch, but some of them aren't working. So what hub are you going with now? Like, are you going? You said
I'm going to the Habitat. I actually had some light switches that were having some trouble with my SmartThings hub, and I got them working. But I asked them. I said, "Well, if you could recommend any hub at all, what would it be?" And they said Habitat was. It doesn't have to go to the outside universe to go ahead and be able to go ahead and do its work. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. But I appreciate the information a lot.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter or Discord or you know, leave a comment on my blog, and
somewhere I'll track you down.
Yeah.
There you go.
we'll work on including those contact links in pretty much everywhere. It's Slack, Twitter, the video itself, like in the description. So if you need it, just check back on the video later. We should have it there afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. The last link is just, I figured it'll be a lot easier to get to my website with that link, but it points straight to it.